This video tutorial I will explain web service endpoint for update user and related addresses. And this is the example of one-to-many relationship. Here you can see users table. It has user related columns. And here you can see addresses table. It has address related columns. One user can have n number of addresses. So it is one-to-many relationship. Primary key of users table is linked to addresses table as a foreign key. We will see the example now. Here you can see users table. It has one record, and this primary key is linked in addresses table. Here you can see, and there are two records associated with the primary key 1. So now we will see how to update this user details and how to update this address details. So what we will do is we will update the user information and we will update existing these two records, and also we will add one more address. We will see how to do that. Here you can see the class user controller, which is REST controller. It has update user method which accept user ID, which is public user ID, and based on this user ID only the user information will be updated. And it accept user details request model, and this method returns user rest. And to call this method we have to use put method, and this method consumes JSON or XML and produces JSON or XML, and this is the path variable, and that value will be assigned to this user ID. And inside this method we are checking the incoming email is empty or not. If it is empty, then it throws user service exception with the message missing required fields. And if required fields are there in the incoming request, then here I am creating a model mapper object, then calling map method of model mapper object, and copying user details property values to user DTO object. And this method returns user DTO object. Then I am calling update user method of user service object, and passing user ID and user DTO object. This method is responsible for updating the user information along with addresses. And this method returns updated user DTO object. Then using map method of model mapper object, I am copying property values from updated user DTO object to user rest object, and this method returns user rest object that I am returning to the caller. Now we will see user details request model class. It has user related properties and a list of address request model. And address request model class has address related properties. Next we will see user DTO class. It has user related properties and a list of address DTO, and address DTO class has address related properties. Next we will see user rest class. It has user related properties and list of addresses rest. And this class has address related properties. Next we will see user service interface. And here you can see user service interface, and it has update user method which accept user ID and user DTO object. And this method is abstract method, and implementation of this method is there in the user service symbol class. Here you can see user service symbol class which implements user service interface and provide implementation of update user method. This update user method accept user ID and user DTO object, and based on the user ID I am getting existing user entity object from database. If it is not there, then it will throw user service exception with the message record not found. If user entity object is there, then from existing user entity object I am getting list of address entity object, and using for each loop I am getting each address entity object from list of address entity object, and setting user details as null. So basically what I am doing is this foreign key I am making as null, so that it will be unreferenced from the existing user. So after that what I am doing is I am getting list of address DTO objects from user DTO object. Then using for each loop I am getting each address DTO object from list of address DTO, and setting public address ID, and setting user details. Then I am creating a model mapper object. Using map method of model mapper object, I am copying user DTO property values to user entity object. This method returns user entity object. In that user entity object, I am setting ID from existing user object, and user ID from existing user object. Then I am setting encrypted password. Then I am calling save method of user repository object, and passing the user entity. And this method is responsible for saving user details and related address details in users table and addresses table. And this method returns updated user entity object. Using map method of model mapper object, I am copying updated user entity object property values to user DTO object. This method returns return user DTO object that I am returning to the controller. Now we will see user entity class, and here you can see user entity class which is mapped to users table, and it has user related properties and list of address entity. And here you can see address entity class, and it is mapped to addresses table, and it has address related properties and user entity object. Next we will see user repository interface. And here you can see user repository interface, and this is responsible for CRUD operation related to users table and addresses table. Next we will see address repository interface. And here you can see address repository interface, and it is repository, and it is responsible for address related CRUD operations. Now we will start the application in debug mode. First I will send request to login URL to get public user ID and JWT token for the user Arun. And HTTP method is post, and in the body I am sending the username and password. Here username is email ID and password is pass123. Click on send and status is 200. It is successful. Click on headers and here we got public user ID. Copy this. First I will send the get request. Copy this JWT token. Click on headers and in authorization header paste the JWT token. Click on send. For this particular public user ID, the Arun information is there. And Arun has two addresses. One is in Bangalore, which is billing address. Another one is in Chennai, and it is shipping address. Now copy this response and now I am going to send request to this URL and HTTP method is put and in the body paste the response we copied. And this is the public user ID. Copy this and paste it here and remove this. This public address ID is not needed. Remove this. This also not needed. Remove this. Now I am going to update the existing information. So I am changing the last name as Kumar and changing address information 15th cross to 90 cross. Postal code changing to and here 123rd cross to 300 cross and changing the postal code to some other value and I am going to add one more address also. Copy this and added one more address. Change it to Delhi. Here password is missing and add the password. Now copy this JWT token and update in the authorization header. If it is not there, please add it. Now I am going to update the Arun information and Arun last name is changing to Kumar and existing two address information I have changed and also I have added one more additional address. Click on send. Request reached here. The incoming request has 3 addresses. And here you can see the output, and user information is updated with 3 addresses, and also last name is changed to Kumar. Here you can see the response. And here you can see the third address also added. We can check it in database. Here you can see last name is changed to Kumar, and in addresses table old 2 addresses are unlinked by setting null, and these are the 3 addresses linked. Now for the same user ID, try for get, and now I got changed last name, which is Kumar, and 3 addresses. Now I am going to send update request to the user which is not there in the users table, giving some invalid ID. Click on send, and request reached here, and here we got user entity from DB is null, so it will throw user service exception with record not found message, and here we got the output, record with provided ID is not found. You can get Java source code link for each video in the description section of the video. Here you can see the description section. Click on show more, and here you can see the Java source code links. Click on these links to get the Java source code.